Before we begin, I'm thrilled to share that my new book, No More Bosses, The Journey to Sustainable Self-Employment, which is published by Penguin, is on Amazon bestseller list. In the book, I get real about overcoming my own fear and self-doubts to pursue my entrepreneurial dreams. I share the framework I use, like fear setting, the regret minimization approach, that help me get comfortable with the discomfort of change. I also open up about how I discover my unique strength and turn them into a viable business. Building my personal brand, developing an effective marketing strategy, assembling a killer support network. It's all in there. It's been a constant learning process to optimize my productivity and find that elusive balance. But trust me, it's been one heck of a journey. Now, whether you're already self-employed or just toying with the idea, I'm confident this book is going to provide you with the roadmap full of real-world guidance and inspiration. You can get a copy of No More Bosses at Amazon, Kinokuniya, and all major bookstores. And now, back to the show. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Adrian Tan Show. This is actually our Season 4, Episode 1. I did not expect to start this episode so early, but a rare guest, a VVIP, reached out to me, so I can't say no. And it's a very interesting guest because a returning guest. He first appeared in Episode 9. And when I did a check earlier today, that was in March 2020. Let's welcome Hoyin.
Dude, I'm so excited to be back, Adrian. I can't believe, well, first of all, congratulations from Episode 9. You're still on it. I mean, that is awesome. And I just want to...
Thanks, Hoyin. So during Episode 9, we were talking about Remo. For audience who may not have joined my podcast so earlier, maybe you could give a quick rundown about Remo. That's not all we'll be talking about today, and also to help people understand who have caught up with you back then. What's going on with Remo right now?
I like that question because it's like what happened then, and then it's like an update. So I'll give you an update on what happened. So at the time when we were talking, COVID was starting to kind of come along. And it's so funny. So Remo in short is a virtual events platform. So we run large virtual events up to 4,000 people, and workshops, trainings, job fairs, mentor-mentee matching. And the reason it's sort of like Zoom. And the key difference is that it has like a 2D map where people can kind of move around. And it's typically a top-down view, like a camera's at the top and you look down and there's a bunch of tables. And you could double click on a table and your little avatar will move to that table. So it's like a game, but it's not like a hardcore game. It's a game that it's an interface that's just very accessible. And so, I remember I told my wife was like, oh, so what's this deal with this Remo thing? Where are you going to go? And stuff like that. So in January of 2020, I said, okay, I will do this until April of 2020. If nothing works, then I'll shut it down and I'll go do something else. And then when March, right when the time we did this podcast is when we started getting leads to come in. And so obviously, people needed some kind of event solution. And so we were one of the biggest, thanks to your podcast and a bunch of podcasts I did at that time, we were basically in the top 3. There's only 3 companies that were doing what we were doing. And so we took off like a rocket ship. I had about 6 people in March of 2020. By the end of the year, I had 120 people on the team. We grew from like $6,000. We made $6,000 in the month of March. By the end, we were like well into 8 figures. So it was incredible rocket ship that grew super fast. I learned a lot about blitz scaling because we were literally blitz scaling, but without any funding. It was all bootstrap. And we were all just taking in leads, like the closing life cycle, like the sales cycle for closing was like 2 phone calls within a week.
That's crazy, man.
It was absolutely insane. Like people would call and say, oh, here's my issues and blah, blah, blah. Or here's what I need. And then they would buy like maybe 4 or 5 days later. We would see the money come in. And yeah, I mean, it was a huge scaling challenge. Literally the product obviously wasn't built for that scale. So literally it was breaking and we were fighting fires all at the same time. One of the big lessons I learned was like, when the trend, the tidal wave, the tsunami is coming, your product doesn't actually have to be that good, which is what our product was not good.
That's
But
going to
it
be the
doesn't
quote of this
matter.
podcast.
It doesn't matter so like we're in AI right now. It's in some areas, in some pockets, stuff like that. It's like when the wave is there, nobody really cares too much about the quality of the product. It's just the wave is just too big. And so I can talk about more about learnings, but like that was some of the, a lot of battle stories that we were going through. But in brief, that's kind of what happened.
Okay. And where is the company right now? Given that the tsunami has more or less tapered down, how are people responding to this form of work collaboration?
So obviously, any kind of tsunami, recedes, and what goes up must come down. It's just the nature of not just gravity, but I think it's the nature of things in general. So as the pandemic kind of went away, what it provided us was a lot of exposure. So a lot of people knew about us. It normalized online events. And so that was sort of like top of funnel exposure and awareness has been generated. And so as it receded, we started working really hard in identifying who our ICP is moving forward after the pandemic. And so we looked really intently and found a bunch of use cases and types of customers and industries that really like using us. And so we had to reduce a lot of our we had a lot of pandemic, how should I say, we had to lower that capacity. So we did. So we lowered it. But what happened was that the product was better. The product became better. Our processes became better. And so we didn't need as many people to do that. So we reduced our team. Right now it's down to about 20 people. But we are now have identified a very core group of customers that we would have been able to get without the pandemic. So even though the company is not, at such a high level, we've found sustainable growth now. And that to me is really what I've always looked forward to, not being at the high point. Because when you're at the high point, you're looking down. But now we're looking up.
So many words and quotes of wisdom from you, Hoyin. And I'm very certain every founder right now would trade anything to make sure that they can get sustainable growth, because that is what is sorely lacking. But of course, our conversation today is really more about this other business that you have started. And when I first got to take a look at the website, it's really interesting and intriguing. It's something that I've learned before, but the positioning of what you're trying to do is slightly different. And maybe you could shed a bit more on this. And I also would be very interested on how this whole thing come about.
So I'm glad you asked that. It actually has a lot to do with the story that I just told you. So when I was growing like just 200, 300, 400% a month, I was so overwhelmed. And my first son was born in October of 2020. And so I just couldn't keep up with everything. I had a lot of things going on. And I was very reluctant initially to bring in an executive assistant. And so, and what I had, it's one of those things where like, once you have it, you wish you made that decision sooner. It's one of those types of decisions. That was it for me. And when I went through that process, I had an executive assistant. I even had a chief of staff. And one of the reasons why I did that was because when my son was born, I had a really hard time just balancing my life in general. And when everyone's working hard, you're not thinking about like from a third perspective, your day to day and what you're doing. Are you healthy? Are you eating? Are you spending time enough with everyone? You're just grinding. And that's a very myopic view sometimes, which you need in order to focus. But what I realized was that I was ignoring a lot of the other things that I should be really kind of focusing on. So I actually worked so hard that I burnt out 3 times. And then I also missed my son's first steps. And that just really kind of made me reevaluate a lot of things. Also, a very serious conversation with my wife. And so like, and those things kind of hit me. And I realized that I really needed someone. And that especially after the pandemic, your work life and your personal life are really even more intertwined than ever before, especially the hybrid work. But the problem now is as leaders and as founders, CEOs, whatever it is for hybrid work, we've adapted some of the way how we work in terms of productivity for this lifestyle. But in general, the CEO lifestyle hasn't, or the support structure or the executive support structure to facilitate the, what I call the modern CEO post-pandemic really hasn't changed. And this is really why, the core reason why I created Hermessi. And Hermessi is supposed to address this. And on top of that, you have AI, right? And AI brings on all these productivity possibilities. Like, for example, ChatGPT 01 Tree View, the new ChatGPT 01 just came out. And I started testing it, but how many people can be bothered to really do a whole set of trial and error to really understand, okay, this is what the new thing can do. I can now do these types of things and all that. And how can it be relevant to your business? Because you can read what other people do, but how does it be relevant to your business? And AI and the speed of and noise of social media just makes it really difficult, I believe, for a CEO to really be on the cutting edge, be highly productive, and to really take advantage of this and to gain an edge, right? To really, truly gain an edge. And that's part of why I create Hermessi as well, is to facilitate and support that exec so that they can be at the cutting edge and be able to arbitrage the difference between someone who may not be using ChatGPT or maybe a little bit, but someone who is really using it to the max, and then becoming like not just a 1.2x CEO, like become a 2x, 3x CEO. How do you become that?
So if make you feel any better, I was so burned out that I missed the birth of one of my sons. And that, of course, also resulted in a very long conversation. And until today, I think we are still talking about it. Why did that happen? Now, back to this. I'm very fascinated about the AI part, but I'm also interested to understand more about the motivation behind it. Because for most people, okay, I'm overwhelmed. I find an EA. That's the end of the story. No podcast today. That's it. But for you, you actually started a business to help other CEO with this same kind of issue. What's the key motivation behind that?
Well, one is that I looked at a lot of EA services, and a lot of them are not very, like, there's not that much training involved. And so I felt that the whole industry really wasn't the way how I would have loved it to be. I like it to be as like a customer. So one way is like I saw that. The second is that, like, I feel like executives today need more support than ever. And there's this huge arbitrage opportunity that I just told you about, like how to become a really like 2x, 3x CEO. And I feel like the arbitrage opportunity is very important nowadays because you're trying to be like, how do you work more for less time? Like, it's always this question. And now with AI, you can do that. But there's just so much like noise around that. The other reason why I'm doing it is because for EAs in general, and I've worked with a lot of remote talent for a while, a lot of EAs typically have a hard time finding, or VAs for that matter, have a hard time getting actual career trajectory. I've hired people that are the chat support leader and they manage like 200 people. And then they work with me and they're at the lowest level. Like, they're just chat support. So a lot of people, from when you outsource out, there's just this feeling that people just kind of go up and down, and they can never puncture across the ceiling. And so one of the challenges and things that I felt like is that they're not really being upskilled properly. And so they never able to get that normal career trajectory in the Western hemisphere where people slowly can have this like career trajectory where they can make more money. And so that's one of the key things that I found and I want to solve. And so one of the things that we do at Hermessi is we invest a lot in training, so much in training that it is our main priority to have as high of retention as possible because if we spend so much time training, I don't want that person to walk out. And so the incentives of the company I really aligned it so that it's a triple win, because if I want to have a long-term relationship with a client, I have to have a long-term relationship with the EA. So all of that feeds in together to create this really highly aligned incentive system that if I can train them well and retain them, then I retain the customer. And the second part of this is I also train them to become a chief of staff. once they become now, once they get through this training, they become chief of staff. Their salary then can be 2 to 3x more than what they were making before. And to me, as AI becomes more and more sophisticated, the job of the EA is going to change. And so they cannot be doing these like basic tasks that AI will eventually do. And the key thing that I believe that cannot be replaced by AI is human to human relationships and managing of humans, managing of people. I don't think AI can replace that, at least in the foreseeable future. And so how do I get that EA to become that chief of staff, to be able to do those things with executive function, with leadership, with project management, those types of things that then they can then get paid more for. And so when you combine that, all of our incentives are all aligned, and it makes a really strong sort of corporate culture and us to really truly have the right reasons to invest in our people.
You mentioned about the kind of training that you have to go through. Can you give us a sense how many hours of training are we looking at?
So to become an EA, it's like 30 days, 30 days of hardcore training, 8 hours a day. And then after that, to become a chief of staff, it ranges to be anywhere between 2 to 3 months of time, like full-time time. So, I mean, it's a lot of hours. But that full-time chief of staff training is spread out across like the year, for example.
Yep.
And so it is mandated that our EAs are training all the time.
Many people that I ask, what do you think a chief of staff do? They will give you different answers.
Right.
Perhaps we can set the record straight in this episode for everyone out there. What's the key difference between a chief of staff and an EA?
So an EA is someone who does more basic things like they calendar, travel, email support, help you do simple research, like tax, legal, NDA signing, contract signing, like a lot of these like very simple, like really critical tasks. They can, more senior EAs can then we'll do organizing events, do webinars, understand how to use tools, that kind of stuff. And what a chief of staff does is let's say you have a special project that you need to get done, like a special project to lead, and then they might give it to someone else to then take. And that's like an example. Another example is a chief of staff will organize a lot of the leadership meetings, set the agenda, maybe do OKRs, set OKRs. They become this unbiased, neutral third party amongst everyone in the leadership team. And then they're also, an EA is an eyes and ears, but the different of the CEO, so she knows a lot of what's going on. The difference is that the chief of staff then knows more precisely what the motivations are for everyone, and then is able to create policy or create better decision making or at a higher level to help with the decision making for that. So I'll give you an example. The CEO might have an idea. It's like, hey, I want to do this policy. And then the chief of staff would say oh, well, the CRO might have this type of issue, or this person might have that issue. I recommend instead of doing what you're thinking, we need to do it this way. And I think everyone will be more happy about it because of this, this, and this. So she becomes this buffer, but also this knowledge, this personal knowledge to understand what will actually work across the entire organization, because she knows pretty much everybody there. She also acts as this person who knows at all levels of the organization what's going on with different people, and who are people that should be promoted, not promoted. She just knows a lot. She's kind of like this community. It's not a social butterfly, but it's someone who just knows what's going on and knows what everyone's working on or doing, and has a good pulse of where the company is at in terms of morale or whatever. Because people, a lot of people, including senior managers or C-level execs, may never tell the truth to the CEO, but the chief of staff will know. And even EAs, the good EAs will also know. They will also report back, actually, this is what they really think. And this is incredibly valuable to help you make better decisions, people decisions in general. And so those are a bunch of examples. They can also do other things too, but it's really closing into executive function and being able to make the executive make better decisions and take off some of the executive function load off of his plate to somebody else.
It just sounds like a mesh between a semi-COO, a semi-deputy, and a semi-trusted advisor all meshed together. And I do see the merit of having someone like that in an organization. Now, the term chief of staff, probably we hear it more on television because the White House has a chief of staff. But within the working context, I guess at least in Singapore, it is a relatively new term. Why the sudden prevalence of a term or someone like a chief of staff? What has changed since you mentioned about the modern CEO? Could that be one of the contributing factor to the creation or the prevalence of a chief of staff?
So the chief of staff term actually came from the military originally. So generals had a chief of staff. And because the military is so structured, the chief of staff was there to kind of manage all the generals. And obviously, then government had that because it's obviously, related to the military. And then that transitioned into large organizations, enterprise, large companies also brought in individuals of chief of staff to also do something very, very similar. And so chief of staff has always sort of existed, but the role could be played by different people. Like it could be played by the COO, for example, or part of the COO, part of the EA. Sometimes the EA is doing chief of staff work, but it's not being trained or being paid as chief of staff. Common occurrence. And so what I'm also really trying to do is bring this chief of staff concept down mid-sized, other large-sized companies, startups, to bring this concept downwards in order to better provide a much more effective organizational productivity for the entire team. I would say that it really got popularized through a lot of large companies. Definitely started probably with defense contractors, which they originally were from, a lot of them were ex-military. Then from there, they must have permeated towards companies. I would say like the benefit, or not the benefit, but the reason why it's become more popularized is because it provides a lot of value, but also provides a lot of training ground for really talented individuals who become a chief of staff first, and they do it for like a few years, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and then they move into the business. They take over something around the business. That's a very, very common track. And for us, that aligns exactly in terms of what we want for our staff, is that once they become a chief of staff, they work there for however many years, and then they move into the company, take over some business unit or some project or whatever, and then they also then get a salary bump from there. This pathway was unavailable to EAs or any kind of remote work individuals before, was just not available. And so now what I'm doing is I'm opening up this channel to make it more available for them, we go and find crazy talented people, super talented people, but they just don't have the opportunities that are structured in a way that allows them to get to some really amazing job and also financial, whatever result outcome that they want for themselves.
I've seen CEOs with 3 EAs. I've seen chief growth officer of maybe a small APAC office with a chief of staff. I've also seen people like Elon Musk who decided not to have a PA. How would one know whether they need a PA or a chief of staff?
I mean, for people who don't have one, somebody's doing that work. Somebody is doing it. They may not have called that title that person, but it might be distributed across different people. It could be your C-level execs that are doing that work. Somebody's doing it because it has to be done. In terms of like whether you need it or not, I think it's a lot about if it's not just about being overwhelmed. It's like, are you focused in terms of what you're doing? Or is your day full of meetings and you're just all over the place? Are you reaching your goals for yourself and for the company? Are you able to manage all these competing priorities, right? Or are there conflicts between your priorities? For example, your work, family, your work versus your partner, your work versus nonprofit boards that you're on, your work versus maybe you run a few projects or a few companies or whatever that is, and you're trying to do a few things at the same time. All these things are at a collision course and are just demanding your time. And so that also a combination. And also like if you're reporting too many people report to you, or just simply is that you're just not able to produce the results that you need, maybe because there's a lack of processes, there's a lack of systems, there's a lack of things that make you do something or your organization to do something on a consistent basis for you to get results. You're just kind of trying this and then trying this and then trying this. It's just very not committed, which is what a lot of people do. and there's no learning and feedback loop from that. You're not properly getting that right feedback loop in place. So there's a lot of challenges that could come from not being able to reach your goals, and an EA and a chief of staff really helps put structure and rigor around all these things that I mentioned, so that you can then start learning and getting much like, just pretend you're at, so if you want it, doing business, it's like, and learning in general is you go in a batting cage, you try to swing and you try to hit the ball. The key thing is you just have to practice many, many times. Why? Because you're like, oh, the ball came, I swung too low, or I had to swing harder. Like, you're learning each time you're batting. What's happening now to most people is you're just swinging wildly. You're not even looking at the ball, and then you're not even thinking what you should do to improve. You did. And by the way, each time you go up to swing, you swing it once, and then you go eat dinner, or you go eat lunch, and then you come back and you take another swing. And then after that, oh, I'm just going to go eat lunch again. Like, there's no consistency. You're not doing it enough, and you're not learning. So all of that just slows everything down. Like, you're not going to be able to get to where you want to be. And that's what EAs do, is they help create systems that work for you. Not tell you that you should do it, but how do I create this system that makes you do the things that you need to do and you enjoy doing them?
So tell us more about the AI aspect, because that is something that I found really fascinating and not pretty much mentioned in most of the companies that also may provide virtual assistants or EA on demand. How does this actually benefit the end user or the founder or the CEO? Could you give us an example?
Yeah. So all of our EAs are trained all on ChatGPT or any kind of tool. Okay. First of all, this space is moving all the time. I was on ChatGPT, I unsubscribed, went to Perplexity, and then I realized, oh, there's now new functionality on ChatGPT. Okay, I gotta switch over to that now. So the space is moving very fast. How are you going to get updated? So we do all training. Once the ChatGPT o1 came out, we dove deep into it. We tested it. We did everything, and then taught our EAs within a week. And then after that, we keep on training them. Oh, o1 preview, you should do this. You should use the normal ChatGPT for this. You should use Claude for this. So we have all these research that has optimized for the best results. So that's number one. Number two is we train them on all these different tools like Canva, like Zoom Info, Uplead, all these tools. And then we then identify common workflows that each CEO has. And then we built like a playbook for all these different workflows, whether it's like lead generation on LinkedIn, how to remove and unsubscribe emails in your inbox that are like cold or newsletters, or how to recruit people on LinkedIn, or how to like record meetings and then do like summaries on that, not just using AI summaries, but also like human in the loop to make it more effective. So there's all these playbooks. And what we do is we have a lab that all they do is look at these playbooks and then find the best tools and the best workflow, AI and human together, to accomplish that workflow at the highest speed, the highest efficiency, the highest ROI, like the best result, basically. Quality and whatever outcome that you measure. And we then do that research, and then we then share those playbooks with the rest of the team, and then they then execute those playbooks. And so we're doing all of that research so that you get the most cutting edge workflows and processes. And if you didn't have that, you would probably use one process and then that's it. And you probably revisit it maybe a little while later. But we're constantly finding like the best ways. And this unlocks, not just from a productivity, makes them a 2 to 3x EA, which then in turn makes a CEO a 2 to 3x CEO. But it also increases the arbitrage and the distance between someone who is like, oh, they brought in EA and maybe doing some training. It increases that distance further and further and further away as time goes on. And so the productivity gains are really, really immense over time. And that's what we do. So it's not fully AI. It's a combination of humans and AI applying these applications or these AI applications to get the most out of that. And so that is our starting point. Now, later, we are developing some proprietary tools ourselves. That is our vision. And that might incorporate AI and other things. But our base case is let's get it right first. Let's get it right with humans and tools together. And how do we make the best workflows out of that, constantly update those, and then we can go from there.
How many CEOs or founders are you serving right now? And are they from any specific countries? Is there any geographical restriction or focus that you have?
Yeah. So right now we have 10 customers. So we just started, but we're gaining traction quite a lot. We're getting a lot of inbound coming in. And there's no limitation in terms of which countries you're from. We do typically work with North America and Europe, and also Singapore and Australia. The typical client it's a startup. We've got some crypto people. We have tech. We have people that are not in tech, like they're like a coach or someone who sells digital products. So it's quite varied.
As a typical EA or chief of staff where they work for you full time, but they can be in lots of weeks and all that. How would one be able to discern how much time they may need from an EA? Is there any advice that you may have for people to review in their work to decide what is a good time for them to find an EA to commit to?
So what we do is, there's another key differentiation of what we do. So when you onboard with us, we actually give you 2 weeks of productivity coaching. Nobody does this because it's too expensive. But we found a way how to do it really effectively. And it's basically, we have a system and we have a team where we analyze all your workflows. We analyze all the work you're doing. We analyze your personal schedule and your work schedule. And then we coach you on what workflows to improve on, how to make your life better, what are the systems we put in place. And then we hand that off to the EA to then go and execute. And so this typically costs anywhere between $1,000 to $3,000 US just to do this type of consulting. And we also follow up that. So we go through your entire life. It's like, sometimes you get someone to come over to your house and clean it, like just do this big cleanup of your house. It's like that, but for your work and personal life, your work and personal life. It's like that. And so you will have ideas in terms of what you think you can hand off to someone. But ultimately, once we go through this, we also have an assessment that we can give as well that can determine what are the things that you can give to an EA immediately to delegate. But we basically teach you how to delegate. And here's the key reason why. A lot of people, a lot of companies, what they do is they match the EA with the exec, and then off they go. They sit on this island, and then they just try to figure out each other, how to work with each other. My experience is that sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. And so what we do to come in is we act as this person who basically helps build up all those initial sort of relationships and workflows and processes at the beginning to ensure maximum success. A lot of people fail working with EAs because they've never delegated. They don't know what to delegate. They don't know what jobs can an EA do. There's a lot of things they can do, but how do you give them instructions? There's all these very simple, basic things that maybe somebody can sort of do or have to, but we help push that level of, it's like a skill almost, from maybe you're 40% good or even 60%, but we push all the way up to 100%.
I would imagine for CEO and founders on a regular basis, they'll come across confidential stuff, trade secrets, etc. And that might be quite tricky for them to navigate when they want to work with a virtual EA or chief of staff. What are some of the best practices you can recommend for people so that both sides would be happy working with each other?
I'll talk about what the best practices are, and I'll talk about what we do. So the best practice is that use password sharing tools like LastPass, 1Password, number one. Number two, at the beginning, it's a trust building exercise. So don't give anything that is very sensitive. Second is that you try to give them a laptop or a phone that it's all fully secure, and that it has monitoring tools on it. It has all the security, like you said, passwords, and that you have all of the security policy on that from your company or whatever. That's like the best case scenario. In our case, we do all of that for you. We monitor the password. We have all that stuff. You don't have to buy the computer. You don't have to do all the phone. We've got all that also provided. In addition to the phone that you need, then we provide a phone for them. And so all that stuff is done. The second is that ideally, when it comes to financial transactions, over time, they do financial transactions, like they book, book flights, book dinners, you book whatever.
Yep.
So in our system, and what we do is we just have thresholds, just like a bank. Like if you're wiring money over a certain amount of money, a certain amount, we need to review it, and we need to see the backup documentation. And so any transaction, all transactions are recorded, and so we have this auditable log across the entire company on what is being done or not done. And so it provides high degree of transparency to the exec. And so we do all that security monitoring in-house, which you can do on your own. This is totally possible. But we highly discourage like giving the credit card and all this stuff very strictly at the beginning. It has to be chemistry, and it has to be trust that is built over time.
And of course, with trust comes opportunities to work with EAs and chief of staff who are also AI experts. For people who may be keen to learn more about this, where can they go to?
So you can go to hermessi.com, or I'm sure I'll give you the link. And also you can come to my LinkedIn page as well to kind of see, I'll talk a lot about productivity. I'll talk a lot about just leadership in general, a lot of different things. So you can come and check out that.
That would be great. All this will be added into the show notes. Hoyin, thank you so much for coming back onto the show. Lovely speaking with you again, and also schooling me on the world of virtual EA and exactly what a chief of staff do. Thank you so much for coming.